I beat the Parade Master more times than I'd like to admit getting benchmarks for this video, but I hope both Windows and Linux users find it worth it. The parameters I'll be covering are Linux DX11 with 32-bit disabled, Linux DX11 with 32-bit enabled, Linux DX12, Windows DX11, and Windows DX12. For both platforms, you can force DX11 by adding -DX11 to your Steam launch options. I disabled all upscaling and used the highest graphical settings throughout. All benchmarks were run through the entire intro of Liza P until the Parade Master. Let's start on the Linux side. I'm running CachyOS with the kernel 6.19.8-1 and NVIDIA drivers 595.45.04. The first thing I want to flag, and this is probably an important takeaway from the whole video, is a flag called Proton NVIDIA libs no 32-bit equals 1. This is sometimes recommended for NVIDIA 4000 and 5000 series GPUs, and I had it enabled in my launch options carried over from other games. You do not want this flag enabled for Liza P. As you can see from both the gameplay footage and the frame time graph. Removing this flag and restoring 32-bit support eliminates the stuttering almost entirely. For my other Linux launch options, I also found that Proton enable Wayland equals 1 was necessary, and the game kept freezing without it in my testing. Of course, this only applies if you're on Wayland and not X11/Xorg. Next, I compared DX11 against DX12 on Linux, and DX11 came out ahead. Not by a huge margin on average FPS, but the 1% and 0.1% lows tell a clearer story. DX12 is less consistent. On top of that, DX12 on Linux uses nearly 1 GB more of VRAM than DX11, 7.17 GB versus 6.22. If you're on a GPU with 8 GB of VRAM, that's a margin worth paying attention to. On the Windows side, the story is consistent with Linux. DX11 also outperforms DX12 here. And again, DX12 uses noticeably more VRAM, going from 5.81 GB to 6.5 GB. So regardless of which platform you're on, I'd recommend adding -DX11 to your Steam launch options for this game. Ultimately, at the end of the day, with a 240Hz monitor, I'll be capping this game at 240 frames per second. And at that cap, Linux and Windows become essentially indistinguishable in practice. Linux stays as my main gaming OS. One thing I'm genuinely curious about is I'd expect these trends to carry over to less powerful NVIDIA GPUs, but I don't have that data. If you benchmark this game on different hardware and your results are consistent with mine or tell a completely different story, drop it in the comments. I always want to see more data points. If you found this useful, hit that like button, and if you want to see more benchmarks like this, please do subscribe. Thanks everyone, and see you in the next one.